My name is Eleanor, and for the better part of 50 years, my life was measured in summers. Not by the calendar, but by the scent of salt marsh and honeysuckle that drifted through the open windows of our beach house in Cape May. My late husband Robert and I bought it when we were barely older than our grandchildren are now. It was a ramshackle little cottage then, with peeling paint and floors that groaned like an old ship. But it had a porch that faced the ocean, and for us, that was everything. We poured our youth into that house, sanding floors on our hands and knees, painting the shutters a cheerful sea blue, and planting a garden of stubborn, salt-tolerant roses. It became our sanctuary, the place where every significant milestone was celebrated. Our son David took his first steps on that sandy porch. We hosted his high school graduation party there, his wedding reception, and every single one of my birthdays since Robert passed away 10 years ago. It was more than a house. It was the physical manifestation of our family's history, a living scrapbook of laughter and love. The tradition of celebrating my birthday there on the first weekend of June was sacred. It was the unofficial start of summer, a gathering that reaffirmed our bonds. This year was to be my 80th, a big one. I had been planning it for months, not a lavish affair, but a meaningful one. I envisioned a simple barbecue on the deck, my two grandchildren, Josh and Emily, running on the beach, and the familiar comfort of having my family around me. I'd already bought new cushions for the porch swing and a ridiculously large bag of charcoal. My daughter-in-law, Karen, had always been a bit transactional about the house. She loved to post photos of it, tagging it #beachlife and #blessed, but she complained about the old plumbing and the lack of a dishwasher. She often made comments like, "When we get this place, the first thing we're doing is a full gut renovation." She said it with a laugh, as if it were a joke, but her eyes always lingered on the original hardwood floors, with a look of disdain. David, bless his heart, was usually caught in the middle, trying to appease both his wife and his mother, a task that often left him looking tired and defeated. Still, I never truly believed they saw the house as just an asset. I thought they understood its soul. As my 80th birthday approached, I spoke to David on the phone, my heart fluttering with anticipation. "I've found that old recipe for your father's potato salad," I told him, my voice warm, "and I thought we could finally get that new kite for Josh you were talking about." There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on his end, a silence that felt heavier than it should have. "That sounds great, Mom," he said, but his tone was flat, lacking the usual enthusiasm. I chose to ignore it. I told myself he was just busy with work. After all, this was my 80th. This was the Cape May house. This was our tradition. They would never miss it. The house was waiting, the ocean was calling, and I was ready to add one more perfect memory to its walls. I had no idea that instead, I was about to learn the true value they placed on both me and our shared history. The call came on a Tuesday, 4 days before my birthday weekend. I was in my small city apartment, folding laundry and mentally running through my packing list for Cape May. When my phone rang with David's picture on the screen, I answered with a cheerful, "Hello, darling. Are you all packed and ready for the weekend?" Again, that strange, heavy silence. It was only a second, but it stretched into an eternity. "Mom, hi," he began, his voice strained. "Listen, something's come up." My hand stilled on the towel I was folding. I sat down on the edge of my bed. "Is everyone okay? Are the children all right?" I asked, my mind immediately jumping to the worst possible conclusions. "Oh, yeah, no, everyone's fine. Perfectly fine," he said quickly. Too quickly. "It's just, well, Karen's sister, you know, the one in Oregon, she's planned this surprise getaway for the kids. A last-minute thing. They're taking them to this incredible nature resort. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Mom. For the kids." I could hear Karen's voice whispering in the background, sharp and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was one of coaching, of feeding him lines. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "A surprise trip? This weekend?" I asked, my voice small. "David, it's my 80th birthday. We've had this planned for months." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "I know, Mom, I know. And I feel terrible. We feel terrible. But this was non-refundable, and the kids would be devastated to miss it. Karen says it's an educational experience they just can't pass up. The excuse was so flimsy, so transparent, it was almost insulting. A non-refundable surprise? It made no sense. "But the beach house," I stammered, feeling foolish and desperate. "Our tradition." That's when Karen took the phone. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she was trying to manage me. "Eleanor, hi. We are just so sorry about the timing. It's a complete nightmare. But you understand, don't you? These are the years for the kids to make memories. We'll do a belated birthday thing for you when we get back. We'll take you out to a nice dinner, our treat." A nice dinner. She was offering me a restaurant meal as a replacement for a legacy. She wasn't asking for my understanding. She was informing me of a decision that had already been made. A decision in which my feelings were, at best, a minor inconvenience. "Where is this nature resort?" I asked, a sliver of suspicion cutting through my disappointment. "Oh, it's up north. Very remote," she said vaguely. "Barely any cell service, so we probably won't be able to call on your birthday, but we'll be thinking of you." The lie was so blatant, so poorly constructed, that it left me breathless. They weren't just canceling, they were hiding something. The conversation ended with a flurry of empty platitudes and rushed goodbyes. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, the folded towel still in my lap, the silence pressing in on me. They weren't just missing my birthday. They were abandoning our most cherished tradition for a lie. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. It was no longer just disappointment I was feeling. It was the chilling premonition of a much deeper betrayal. The day of my 80th birthday arrived with a quiet, indifferent drizzle. The gray sky outside my apartment window seemed to reflect the color of my mood. There would be no salt air, no sound of crashing waves, no sticky-fingered grandchildren hugging my knees. There was just me, the silence, and a small store-bought cupcake with a single unlit candle sitting on my kitchen table. I tried to make the best of it. I called my sister, who sang a wobbly happy birthday over the phone. I scrolled through birthday wishes on social media from friends and distant relatives, but every cheerful message felt like a small paper cut on my heart, a reminder of who wasn't there, of the celebration that should have been. I refused to let them completely ruin my day. I put on a nice blouse, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down with the cupcake. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to the empty room, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Just as I was about to blow out the single candle, my phone buzzed on the table. For a foolish, hopeful second, my heart leaped. Maybe it was David, calling from a spot with surprise cell service. Maybe it was a video of the kids wishing me a happy birthday. I picked it up. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, but it contained a picture. My breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of my family, David, Karen, Josh, and Emily, grinning from ear to ear. They were not at a nature resort in the north. They were on the porch of my beach house in Cape May, my beach house. Emily was holding up a half-eaten hot dog, and Josh was making a silly face. In the background, I could see the new cushions I had bought for the porch swing. They were all there, using my home, having the very party I was meant to be at, without me. My eyes scanned the photo, a wave of nausea washing over me. They hadn't just lied, they had stolen my celebration, my home, my day. Beneath the picture was a single line of text. It was from Karen. She must have sent it from a friend's phone or a new number to bypass my knowing it was her. The message read, "Sorry we couldn't make it. Decided to use the beach house anyway. Hope you're having a quiet day. Honestly, you're too old for big parties anyway. LOL. LOL." She ended her breathtaking cruelty with laughing out loud. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a mockery. They hadn't canceled on me. They had uninvited me from my own life, from my own home on my 80th birthday. They saw me as an obstacle, a relic whose only remaining value was the property she would one day leave behind. The quiet drizzle outside had become a steady, mournful rain. I looked from the grinning faces in the photo to the sad, solitary cupcake on my table. The pain was immense, a physical blow that left me winded. But as the initial shock subsided, it was replaced by something else. A cold, clear, and unyielding anger. They thought I was just a sweet, clueless old lady who would sigh, accept their flimsy excuses, and wait patiently for a nice dinner. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. Staring at that photo, at their smiling, entitled faces, I blew out the candle on my cupcake and made a different kind of wish. They wanted the house so badly? They wanted to make memories there without me? Fine. I would make sure this was one memory they would never, ever forget. For the rest of the day, I didn't move from my chair. I just sat there, the phone dark on the table. The cruel words of the text message seared into my mind. The rain continued its relentless beat against the window pane, a soundtrack to the storm brewing inside me. Grief and rage warred within me. I thought of Robert, of the love and labor we poured into that house. He would have been appalled. He always said the house was a home, not a piece of real estate. It was for family, for togetherness. But what do you do when the family you built it for sees it as nothing more than a free vacation spot, and you as the inconvenient gatekeeper? My mind drifted back through the years. I remembered Karen's subtle digs, her jokes about renovations, her impatience. I recalled David's increasing spinelessness, his inability to stand up for me, for our traditions. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow erosion. This birthday, this text message, was just the final, crumbling stone in a foundation that had been cracking for years. They didn't see me. They saw a living will, a set of keys, an inheritance they were tired of waiting for. The thought was liberating in its sheer awfulness. If they had already reduced me to a mere property owner, then I would act like one. A sharp, decisive, unsentimental property owner. I stood up and walked over to my roll-top desk, the one Robert had refinished for me as a wedding anniversary gift. I pulled out the heavy folder marked Cape May House. Inside was the deed, property tax records, insurance documents, all in my name. Eleanor Miller, sole proprietor. The thought struck me with the force of a lightning bolt, so simple and yet so audacious. They were in my house, treating it as their own. But it wasn't. It was mine. And what does one do with an asset one no longer has a use for? You liquidate it. I could sell it. I could sell the house while they were still in it. The idea was so shocking, so ruthless, that I almost laughed. It was something a character in a movie would do, not Eleanor Miller, the grandmother who bakes cookies and knits sweaters. But the woman they had texted, the woman they had dismissed as too old for parties, was not that Eleanor anymore. That Eleanor had her heart broken. This new Eleanor was a woman who had just been handed a declaration of war. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the phone. I didn't call David to scream at him. I didn't call Karen to cry. I scrolled through my contacts to a name I hadn't needed in years. Tom Henderson. Tom was a local Cape May realtor, a man my age who had sold a neighboring property a few years back. He was known for being discreet, professional, and incredibly efficient. We had a friendly acquaintance, exchanging Christmas cards and pleasantries when I was in town. He would be surprised to hear from me, but he was a businessman. He would understand a transaction. My finger hovered over the call button. This was the point of no return. Selling the house meant letting go of 50 years of memories. It meant accepting that the future I had envisioned, of more summers, more birthdays, more grandchildren on the porch, was gone forever. But what was the alternative? To let them continue to use me and my home, to swallow their disrespect and pretend everything was fine? To wait for them to take me to dinner as a consolation prize? No, my self-respect was worth more than a porch swing and an ocean view. My legacy would not be one of quiet suffering. I took a deep, steadying breath and pressed the button. It was time to call a realtor. Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise. Are you in town? Tom Henderson's voice was exactly as I remembered it. Cheerful, professional, and with the distinct, relaxed cadence of someone who lived by the sea. Hello, Tom. No, I'm in the city, I replied, my own voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I'm calling you on a business matter. There was a slight shift in his tone, a subtle click as he moved into professional mode. Of course. How can I help? I took a breath. Tom, I want to sell my house on Ocean Avenue. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could picture him in his office, pen poised over a notepad, utterly stopped in his tracks. You mean, your house? he finally asked, as if I might own another. The cottage? Yes, Tom, that's the one, I said. And I want to sell it immediately, as in, this week. He cleared his throat. Eleanor, forgive me, but that's a big decision. Is everything all right? A quick sale like that? We can do it in this market, but it often means leaving some money on the table. The price is secondary to the speed, I stated, my resolve hardening with every word. I want it sold. There is, however, one small complication. Oh? My son and his family are currently staying there, I said, delivering the line as calmly as if I were describing the weather. They believe they are on vacation. This time, the silence was even longer. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to piece together the bizarre puzzle I'd just handed him. To his credit, his voice when he finally spoke was pure business. Are they tenants? Is there a lease agreement? No, Tom, I said. They are guests. Guests who have overstayed their welcome. They have no legal claim to the property. My name is the only one on the deed. I see, he said, and I knew from his tone that he did indeed see. He might not have known the whole story, but he understood the subtext. He was a man who had seen every kind of family drama play out through property disputes. Well, that certainly simplifies the legal side of things, if not the personal one. A cash buyer would be ideal for a quick closing, someone who wants the place as is. That's exactly what I'm looking for, I affirmed. Someone who will appreciate the house for what it is. I want to list it immediately, today. Tom hesitated for only a moment. Eleanor, I can have the listing active within the hour. I have a list of clients who are looking for exactly this kind of classic Cape May property. But are you sure? Once this process starts, it moves fast. Was I sure? Every fiber of my being screamed yes. Every memory of that dismissive text, of their smiling faces in that stolen moment, fueled my certainty. They had treated my home like a hotel, and me like an irrelevant manager. It was time for a change in ownership. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Tom, I said. Find me a buyer, a fast one. He agreed, promising to call me as soon as he had any interest. After I hung up, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The decision was made, the wheels were in motion. My family was sunning themselves on the beach, laughing in my house, completely oblivious to the fact that I was, from 100 miles away, selling the very ground from under their feet. It was a terrible, powerful, and deeply satisfying feeling. The old Eleanor may be too old for parties, but the new Eleanor was just getting started. Tom was as good as his word. The market, he had explained, was ravenous for authentic beachfront properties, especially one like mine that hadn't been stripped of its original charm. He didn't even need to take new photos. He had a portfolio from the previous valuation he'd done for my insurance. The listing went live before sunset on my birthday. I imagined my family inside the house, perhaps scrolling on their phones after a day on the beach, completely unaware that their vacation paradise was now being broadcast to prospective buyers across the country. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. The first call came the very next morning. Eleanor, it's Tom. I think I found them. My heart gave a little jump. Already? They're a couple from Philadelphia, he explained, his voice buzzing with excitement. A doctor and a university professor. They've been looking for a classic, unrenovated Cape May cottage for 2 years. They lost out on the Hemlock property last summer and have been kicking themselves ever since. They saw the listing last night, drove down at the crack of dawn, and have been parked outside your house for the last hour. They haven't tried to go in, have they? I asked, a flash of panic rising. No, I told them the situation was delicate and the property was unexpectedly occupied. I asked them to just do a drive-by. Eleanor, they're in love. They want to make a cash offer, 15% over asking price, and they're willing to waive the inspection to close quickly. It was perfect. Almost too perfect. Cash offer. Over asking. No inspection. It was a seller's dream, and in my case, a vengeful grandmother's fantasy. They weren't developers looking to tear it down and build a McMansion. They were academics, people who I hoped would appreciate the history and soul of the place. They wanted to preserve it, not gut it. And they understand the occupancy situation? I asked. They do, Tom confirmed. They said they're happy to close as soon as the paperwork is ready and are prepared to handle the transition of occupancy themselves, legally and formally. They just want the house. They're ready to sign today. Technology, it turns out, is a wonderful tool for swift revenge. Tom emailed me the offer sheet. I sat at my desk, reading through the crisp, legal language. It was all there in black and white. A number far larger than I had anticipated. The names of the buyers, Dr. and Mrs. Albright, and a line for my signature. Karen and David always joked about how I couldn't even work my television remote properly. They assumed I was a technological dinosaur, lost in a world of smartphones and apps. But Robert had been an engineer, and he had insisted I keep up. I knew my way around a computer perfectly well. With a few steady clicks, I opened the document in a secure portal, created a digital signature, and affixed my name to the contract. I hit send. It was done. The house was sold. The entire transaction, from the initial phone call to the final signature, had taken less than 24 hours. I leaned back in my chair, the finality of the act washing over me. I had just sold my past. I had sold the backdrop to my entire adult life. There was a pang of sadness, a momentary flicker of doubt. But then I thought of the text message again. You're too old for parties anyway. LOL. No, this wasn't an ending. It was an emancipation. I had just purchased my freedom, and the down payment was a 50-year-old beach house filled with ghosts who no longer deserved my company. 3 days later, the sale was officially closed. The money was wired into my account, a staggering sum that felt abstract and unreal. The Albrights, the new owners, now held the deed. Tom called to inform me they planned to drive down that afternoon to formally take possession of their new property. He asked if I wanted him to be the one to inform my son. No, Tom, I said, my voice eerily calm. Thank you for everything, but this part is mine. Let them have their moment of discovery. I knew it wouldn't take long. My phone rang at 4:15 p.m. The caller ID showed David. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow, deliberate sip of iced tea. Mom? His voice was a mixture of confusion and irritation. There's a strange couple on the porch. They have a realtor with them. They're saying they bought the house. They're telling us we have to leave. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Well, yes, David, I said matter-of-factly. That's generally what happens when you buy a house. You own it. I could hear a sharp intake of breath. What are you talking about? You sold the house? Without telling us? While we were in it? His voice was rising, cracking with disbelief. In the background, I could hear Karen starting to shriek. Who are these people? David, what is she talking about? I decided it was time to liquidate the asset, I said, using the cold corporate language they understood so well. It seemed like the sensible thing to do. Sensible? He yelled, his voice now a full-blown shout. This is our house, our inheritance, the kids' future. How could you do this to us? To your own family? That's a very interesting question, David, I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy calm. Let me ask you one. How could you lie to your own mother, skip her 80th birthday, and then use her home to have the very party you excluded her from? How could your wife send a text message telling me I'm too old for parties? The line went dead quiet. The only sound was Karen's muffled screeching, which had turned into a string of curses. I had him. He had no defense, no excuse. The truth was laid bare between us. Mom, he stammered, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a pathetic desperation. We were going to celebrate with you. We were going to take you to dinner. A nice dinner, I finished for him. Yes, Karen mentioned that. But you see, David, you taught me a very valuable lesson this week. You taught me that I am, in fact, too old. I'm too old to be disrespected. I'm too old to be taken for granted. I'm too old to maintain a property for people who see it, and me as nothing more than a convenience. But what are we supposed to do? He whimpered. Our things are all here. We're on vacation. That is no longer my concern, I said, the finality in my voice as solid as a slammed door. The Albrights are the new owners. I suggest you speak to them. I'm sure if you're polite, they'll allow you to gather your belongings before you leave. Goodbye, David. I ended the call before he could respond. I placed the phone gently back on its cradle. The shouting on the other end was cut off, replaced once again by the peaceful silence of my apartment. There was no triumph, no joy, just a profound and quiet sense of justice. The transaction was complete. They had wanted the house without me. Now they had it. The days that followed were silent. I received no more calls, no angry texts, no pleading emails. It was as if a 50-year chapter of my life had not just ended, but been completely erased. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Before, it had been the silence of loneliness, a void left by the people who were supposed to be there. Now, it was the silence of peace. It was the sound of my own life, reclaimed. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived in the mail. There was no return address, but the postmark was from David and Karen's hometown. Inside, I found the key to the beach house. There was no note, just the key, lying cold and solitary in the envelope. I held it in my palm, a small brass object that had once unlocked a world of memories. Now it unlocked nothing. It was just a piece of metal, a relic from a life that was no longer mine. I didn't feel sadness. I felt light. I dropped it into the trash can without a second thought. The money from the sale sat in my bank account, a number so large it seemed fictional. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. Robert and I had always been comfortable, but never wealthy. This was a different stratosphere. But then I realized the money wasn't the point. It was the means. It was freedom. It was a future my family had tried to write for me, which I had now seized and could write for myself. I booked a trip, a real one, a 2-week cruise to Alaska, something Robert and I had always talked about but never did. I bought a new laptop and signed up for an online art history course, a passion I had neglected for decades. I sent a large, anonymous donation to the Cape May Historical Society, earmarked for the preservation of historic cottages. My small act of revenge would help preserve the very charm my daughter-in-law had wanted to obliterate. I don't know what happened to David and Karen. I assume they went back to their lives, their world a little smaller, their future inheritance a lot lighter. Perhaps one day they will understand the lesson. Perhaps not. It no longer matters. My life is no longer tied to their expectations or their approval. I am 80 years old and I am finally the sole proprietor of my own happiness. Sometimes when the sun is setting, I'll close my eyes and I can almost smell the salt air and hear the distant crash of the waves. The memories are still there, safe in my mind, where no one can tarnish them. The house is gone, but I saved its soul, and in the process, I saved my own. They were right about one thing. I am too old for their kind of parties. I have new memories to make, new horizons to see, and I plan on enjoying every single one, alone and at peace.